Hello, Magic players and collectors. Welcome back to the Land Library. I'm your librarian, and in this episode of Legendary Locations, we're taking a trip to Innistrad to check in at the Geier Reach Sanitarium. Geier Reach Sanitarium is in the Geier Reach Mountains in the Stensia province, but seeing as the province is basically just entirely mountains and valleys, we're just gonna cover the whole province anyway. And speaking of provinces, since this is the only one with a legendary land, the other three will be getting a set of local landmarks videos instead. Obviously for cards there is Geier Reach Sanitarium itself, and that's gonna be it for legendary lands, since that's the only legendary land that's even on the whole plane. And Geier Reach Sanitarium can tap for a colorless or pay 2 generic and tap to have all players draw a card then discard a card. And while not a land or legendary, this region, actually all 4 regions, but we're just discussing the one right now, have a plain card. Now, for creatures, I don't want to include every little random creature like generic tokens and whatnot, so I'll stick to more relevant or notable creatures. So starting it off with Shilgengar, Sire of Famine, Scourge of Geier Reach Bandit, Somberwald Alpha, Somberwald Beastmaster, Somberwald Dryad, Hound of the Farbogs, Farbog Explorer, Courier Bat, Stensia Innkeeper, and then a whole lot of vampires, most of which are from the wedding, but more on the wedding in the lore. For vampires, we should start with the bride and groom, Olivia Crimson Bride / Olivia Mobilized for War, and Edgar Markov / Edgar Charmed Groom. Then for some staff, Wedding Secretary, Voldaran Bloodcaster, Unholy Officiant, Olivia's Attendants, Blood Tithe Harvester, and Ange Maid of Dishonor. And then for some guests, we've got Belligerent Guest, Blood Crazed Socialite, Blood Petal Celebrant, Gluttonous Guest, Markov Waltzer, and Falconwrath Celebrants. And finally, a few Wedding Crashers, Daybreak Combatants, and Resistance Squad. Now for Planeswalkers, there's a Native-born, a Resident, and some Visitors. Soren Markov, who has 8 Planeswalker cards, including a creature card that transforms into one of these Planeswalkers, is the Native-born Planeswalker. And then Liliana, who was born on Dominaria, but spent most of her life on Innistrad after awakening her Planeswalker Spark, has 12, also including a transforming one, although only 11 are from on Innistrad. And onto the 4 visitors, there is Kaya, Geist Hunter, Nahiri, the Harbinger, Chandra, Dressed to Kill, and Jace, Unraveler of Secrets. For spells, we've got By Invitation Only, Declaration in Stone, Edgar's Awakening, Stensia Banquet, Markov Retribution, Nahiri's Wrath, End of the Festivities, Merciless Resolve, Vampire's Vengeance, and Sure Strike. For enchantments, there's just Call the Bloodline, Stensia Masquerade, and Stensia Uprising. For artifacts, there's Bride's Gown, Groom's Finery, Wedding Ring, Honeymoon Hearse, Ceremonial Knife, and the Moonsilver Key. And for everyone's favorite section, the lands, there is Foreboding Ruins, Voldaran Estate, Stensia Bloodhall, and while I don't really count basics, there is a mountain in Modern Horizons 3 that very clearly has the Voldaran Estate in the art, so I'll add that in as an art. And similarly, the land Blood Crypt is not on this plane either, but there is a Secret Lair print with art of it in the Stensia Bloodhall. Speaking of Secret Lairs, Stensia Bloodhall also has a super cool Secret Lair print, but I won't use that to increase any numbers at all. And that is a total of 28 creatures, either 6 or 23 planeswalkers, depending on if you want to count multiples of a single character, 10 spells, 3 enchantments, 6 artifacts, 3 lands, plus 2 arts, and a plane, for a grand total of 57, or 76 if you want to include all the extras. Stensia is a very mountainous area and distinctly the territory of vampires, especially considering the oldest recorded event for Stensia, and even Innistrad as a whole, was the creation of the vampires. Sometime around negative 2400 to 2500 AR, Edgar Markov, an elderly alchemist, was trying to discover a way to stop aging. Unfortunately, this picked up the interest of an elder demon, Shilgengar, who created a massive famine to manipulate the skilled alchemist to do his bidding. In the midst of the famine, he was desperate to save his family, and it was easy for Shilgengar to approach him with a solution. He wanted a particular angel dead and convinced Edgar to capture and kill said angel. Doing what he was told, Edgar, with the help of his sons, exsanguinated the angel, but this basically ritual killing of an angel did something to everyone involved, turning them into vampires. This was an unforeseen consequence, but it did in fact solve the issues of no longer aging and the lack of food from the famine. So Edgar wholeheartedly embraced his newfound vampirism, forcing the rest of his family to follow suit. Quite notably, the forceful turning of his grandson Soren awakened Soren's planeswalker spark. Soren felt disgruntled about his new vampiric situation, and having new planeswalker powers, he left Innistrad. Other desperate individuals heard about what happened to the Markov family and wanted in, so a second ritual was performed where the rest of the angel's blood was consumed by 11 other people, creating the 12 vampire bloodlines and beginning the Age of Vampires. We don't really have much of any information about what went on for the next 1,000 years, other than Soren, I guess, kept coming and going, and the vampires continued to grow their power. And then around negative 1500 AR, Nahiri awakened her planeswalker spark and unintentionally went to Innistrad. Soren found her lost and confused on one of his many trips home and took her under his wing, becoming her mentor. And together they imprisoned the Eldrazi on her home plane Zendikar, among other things, but that was pretty big, and this will be relevant later, I promise. For the next few thousand years, the vampires grew their power, and Soren, seeing the threat this posed to the plane, tried to convince his grandfather to do something about it, to no avail. So he took matters into his own hands and created the Archangel Avacyn. Many of the vampires thought this was a betrayal to their kind and turned their backs on Soren, but the humans, now having a protector, had more drive to fight back, and eventually the 12 bloodlines settled into 4 major houses, 5 minor houses, and 3 houses being wiped out entirely. But otherwise, not really much else happened again until over on Zendikar when the Eldrazi were starting to stir again and Nahiri called for aid from Soren. After receiving no response, she went to Innistrad to look for him, and as they met on Innistrad, Soren told her he hadn't received any signal from her and it must have been intercepted. And although this was the truth, Nahiri refused to believe it. Enraged by the perceived betrayal, she fought Soren and he was forced to fight back, and ended the fight by sealing her in stone. She remained there for many years, centuries even, and when she finally was freed, she returned to Zendikar to discover the Eldrazi had awoken again and were devastating the plane. Blaming Soren for her absence from Zendikar and subsequent inability to protect it, she was able to reroute one of the Eldrazi that was trying to leave Zendikar to Innistrad and attacked Markov Manor. Soren had to ask for aid from the second most powerful vampire house, House Voldaren, but the head of the household, Olivia, agreed to help him only on the condition that Soren destroyed his beloved creation, Avacyn. After he unmade Avacyn, she did in fact send her army to go fight Nahiri at the ruins of Karlov Manor. In the ensuing battle, Nahiri was severely wounded, but was able to get her revenge by sealing Soren in stone, just as he had sealed her. And then she left the plane, leaving Emrakul to wreak havoc on other parts of the plane. This caused the Gatewatch, a coalition of planeswalkers who fight off multiversal threats, to show up to contain Emrakul. Emrakul then lets herself be contained in Innistrad's moon, conveying the message, "I just no longer want to play," which I think is a really interesting thing to happen. During all this chaos, though, Olivia steals Edgar's coffin from the Markov Manor and brings him back to her own estate, and takes Soren's sword, declaring herself the new Lord of Innistrad. And with Emrakul in the moon, the day-night cycle starts getting out of whack, causing night to become longer and longer. The growing night ruined crops, brought a chill to the land, and corrupted minds, causing a necessity for places like Geier Reach Sanitarium to be built to contain those who were driven mad by Emrakul. In order to resolve daytime, the humans in a different province, so there will be more on this in a different video, started holding a ritual that would fix it, but Olivia swooped in at the last moment and stole the Moonsilver Key, stopping the ritual and leaving the plane in eternal night. Emboldened by the eternal night, Olivia awakened Edgar Markov with her own blood and convinced him to marry her in a ploy to rule the entire plane with their combined powers. It was a very grand wedding with lots of blood and lots of guests, but unbeknownst to Olivia, Soren did not actually die and was able to claw his way back out of his stone prison, showing up to the wedding with the Gatewatch to put a stop to Olivia's schemes. Unfortunately, the Gatewatch wasn't able to get in, only Soren was, and right at the wedding vows, Soren attacked Olivia and freed the captured Sigarda, who then let out an angelic blast that destroyed much of the Voldaran manor, hurt and killed many of the wedding guests, and let in the Gatewatch, who were still stuck outside. With the wedding destroyed and the Moonsilver Key taken away from her, Olivia fled with Edgar, eventually finding an omen path and leaving the plane entirely, starting anew on Thunder Junction. There still was some other plane-wide events, like the Gatewatch returning the Moonsilver Key to restore daytime and the New Phyrexian invasion, but the wedding was basically the last relevant Stensia event, so thus ends our timeline. This card has a decent legacy of use. At first glance, it seems pretty awful. You want me to pay my own mana to let my opponents draw and filter their hands? Ugh. But given the right deck, it actually does really well. It affecting all opponents makes it much stronger in multiplayer formats like Commander, and goes really well with commanders like Nekusar the Mindraiser and Sheralded the Apocalypse, which all punish your opponents for drawing cards, and can continue comboing off with the damage and life drop that they caused with many other cards that care about those things. And even if an opponent has a way to counter that with something like Elfheim's Sanctuary, skipping their draw phase, Geier Reach Sanitarium can still force a draw to get the ball rolling. Granted, that'd be a very rare use case, but still, it'd be perfect in that situation. It also goes with commanders that steal cards that your opponent discards, like Tegrid, God of Fright, or Tinybones, Bauble Burglar. And with it forcing a discard on all opponents, you can really start raking up stolen cards. It even pairs with some commanders that discard your own cards, like Hashatan, Scarab's First, although it's not quite as good in this case because it does still let your opponents filter their hands for free, and there's much better options that don't do that. All this being said, Geier Reach Sanitarium is not good if it's not being a combo piece, so if your other parts aren't up, or if it's in a different deck that doesn't combo with this, it kinda just makes colorless mana and or helps other players, but is legendary, so you'd be better off playing most any other land that makes mana or draws cards. It has carved out a very nice place for itself in a commander as a combo piece in specific decks that like forcing your opponents to draw and or discard, but otherwise it's not very widely used. It's very good in its niche, seeing mostly over 50% play under the commanders in this niche, like a lot of the things I already brought up, but sees only about 3% play in general. I think Geier Reach Sanitarium is about a low B tier card. It's niche, but very good in its niche, which is pretty decent. But it's very lacking in the lore department. It doesn't really have much of anything to do with any of the major events of the region or plane as a whole, but it does at least get mentioned, which is more than I can say for Shivan Gorge, which drops it to a C tier, but I'll still put it above Shivan Gorge for its slight lore advantage. If you've made it this far in the video, might as well drop a like for turn and subscribe for more Landveiled content. If I missed anything, got anything wrong, or you just have questions, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next Legendary Locations with a revisit to Ixalan. But before doing that, I'll be covering the other Innistrad provinces in a series of local landmarks videos. so be on the watch out for those.